He never preached the prosperity gospel. He never begged for a private jet on live TV. And yet, Voddie Baucham may have died richer than most celebrity pastors ever dreamed. While the world was watching megachurch preachers flaunt Gucci shoes and Gulfstreams, Voddie was quietly building a financial empire from Zambia, of all places. He called it ministry. His critics called it the cleanest hustle in the game. What began in the ghettos of South Central Los Angeles with a Buddhist mother and an absent father would somehow lead to Oxford University, a viral bestseller, and $1 million GoFundMe campaign that still has people asking, where did all that money really go? Because here's the twist. This wasn't your average scandal. This was a preacher who publicly rejected social justice, then made over $1.4 million off a health crisis, all while preaching about accountability. If you stay until minute 10, you'll hear the detail that Christian media still refuses to explain. What was Voddie Baucham really building a ministry, a movement, or something much more profitable? Let's find out. Before he ever stood behind a pulpit, Voddie Baucham stood in a living room littered with addiction, silence, and broken dreams. Born in 1969 in South Central Los Angeles, the same year the Crips gang was founded, Voddie was raised by a teenage mother who practiced Buddhism. His father, a would-be professional football player, vanished from the picture long before the boy could spell dad. What followed wasn't hardship. It was statistical inevitability. Drugs, gangs, violence, death. For young black boys in that zip code, it wasn't a matter of if, it was when. By age 11, Voddie was already walking the tightrope between survival and collapse. That's when his mother made a radical choice. She sent him to live with her brother, a retired U.S. Marine Corps drill instructor. And just like that, the boy who came from chaos was dropped into a world of discipline, structure, and masculine order. He learned how to shoot, fish, clean, fix, build. But more than that, he saw for the first time what a stable marriage looked like, what a present, accountable father looked like, what manhood with conviction looked like. Those lessons didn't just shape his habits, they branded his theology. Years later, he would stand before thousands preaching biblical patriarchy, warning of the dangers of fatherless homes, and insisting that masculinity was not toxic but essential. Supporters called it revival, critics called it regression. Either way, the seeds were planted not in seminary, but in that Marine household. But what truly changed his life wasn't a sermon, a Bible verse, or a supernatural dream. It was a tight end from his college football team. And what that teammate told him in a locker room in 1987 would start a transformation no one, not even Voddie himself, saw coming. It didn't happen in a church. It happened in a locker room. New Mexico State University. 1987, Voddie was a Division I tight end, strong, skeptical, and sharp-tongued. And Steve Morgan, a teammate with quiet conviction, had been watching him. For weeks, Steve didn't preach. He asked, he listened, he challenged. Every day after practice, they debated not emotions, but evidence. Most pastors have a testimony filled with tears. Voddie's was filled with apologetics. He wasn't converted by a worship song or a youth retreat. He was convinced, day by day, verse by verse, objection by objection, until one night, it finally clicked. He wasn't just intellectually outmatched, he was spiritually undone. That conversion marked a complete rewiring. The man who once mocked Christianity became obsessed with it, not as a crutch, but as a comprehensive worldview. It wasn't long before his mother followed. And eventually, even the father who once abandoned him sat under Voddie's teaching before dying of heart failure in 2006. But Voddie wasn't content to just believe. He needed to master the faith. He enrolled at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, then Southeastern, then Oxford's Regent Park College. While most young preachers were quoting Instagram verses, he was diagramming Greek syntax. This was a man who could exegete scripture and explain Nietzsche in the same breath, who had lived the inner city struggle and earned academic respect in Ivy circles, that rare mixed street wisdom. Military backbone, theological depth made him a standout in conservative evangelicalism. By the late 90s, he was preaching on college campuses, filling arenas, and writing early drafts of sermons that would later go viral. But back then, no one called him rich. He was just a loud, smart, unapologetic black preacher who made everyone a little uncomfortable. That was about to change. Because Voddie wasn't building a following, he was building an empire. While televangelists were asking for seed offerings, Voddie was quietly selling out lecture halls. No Rolex, no megachurch choir, just a Bible, a brain, and an unapologetic boldness that didn't care if you clapped. In 2006, he founded Grace Family Baptist Church in Spring, Texas. But this wasn't your typical church plant. It was the real-life experiment for everything he preached: family-integrated worship, biblical patriarchy, Reformed theology, no youth groups, no fog machines, no marketing, just doctrine and discipline. At the same time, his publishing career exploded. While others wrote feel-good devotionals, Voddie dropped titles like Family-Driven Faith in the ever-loving truth books that didn't tiptoe around culture, but kicked the door down. Crossway Publishing turned him into a staple in conservative homes, especially among homeschoolers and fathers hungry for masculine theology. But the real breakthrough: YouTube. Clips of his sermons, raw, unedited, often filmed with a single shaky camera, started gaining traction. He wasn't flashy, but he was fearless. He spoke in full paragraphs, took no prisoners, and made you think even if you hated what he said. And people shared it. Millions watched, not because it was trendy, but because it was different. Behind the scenes, the revenue streams were stacking, speaking fees rising with every invite, book royalties pouring in from bestsellers, guest lectures at seminaries adding prestige and paycheck, a growing digital presence monetized through views and ads. By 2015, conservative estimates placed his net worth near $1 million, not because he asked for it, but because people willingly paid for what he offered. And then, in the peak of his American success, he did the unthinkable. He packed up his family, sold the comfort, and moved to Zambia. Most pastors double down once they hit 7 figures. Bigger stages, bigger churches, bigger paychecks. But in 2015, Voddie Baucham walked away from Texas, away from comfort, away from everything that made him one of the most in-demand preachers in America. He moved his entire family to Lusaka, Zambia. To many, it looked like sacrifice. To some, it looked like strategy. Voddie became the founding dean of theology at African Christian University, a modest, Reformed seminary serving a growing evangelical movement on the continent. No megachurch cameras, no luxury homes, just chalkboards, discipleship, and a long-term vision to shape African Christianity for generations. But here's the irony. The farther he got from the American spotlight, the brighter he shined. He returned to the US 3 to 4 times a year for speaking tours. And each time, he wasn't just a preacher, he was now the missionary theologian who gave up wealth to follow conviction. That credibility, it came with higher booking fees, more book deals, and growing media demand. Then came the juggernaut Fault Lines 21, a full frontal attack on the social justice movement. Critical race theory and progressive theology, all from the perspective of a black man with street cred and Oxford training. The book hit New York Times bestseller status, sold hundreds of thousands of copies, and made Voddie the intellectual war general of conservative evangelicalism. Churches paid thousands to bring him in. Universities used his lectures to reframe curriculum. Even non-religious political groups saw him as a cultural weapon, all while he was still living in Zambia. But with every bestseller came backlash, and with every standing ovation came a harder question. If he's living as a humble missionary, why does he need so much money? In February 21, while back in the US for a speaking tour, Voddie collapsed. Diagnosis: advanced heart failure. Doctors at Mayo Clinic told him he was hours from death without emergency surgery. Within days, his allies at Founders Ministries launched a GoFundMe campaign, Voddie Baucham Medical Expense Fund. Initial target, $250,000, then $500,000. Then, after consulting medical experts, $1 million. It hit $1.4 million in less than 5 weeks. Thousands of donors rallied. This was their general, their hero. their voice in the fight against liberal theology, and they gave fast and generously. Baucham got the surgery, he recovered, he finished promoting fault lines, he continued speaking, but then the question started. How much did the surgery really cost? Anonymous sources, including one from G3 Ministries, claimed the real medical expenses were under $300,000. So where did the other $1.1 million go? Requests for financial breakdowns were ignored. GoFundMe policy says funds must be used for the stated purpose. But critics like Julie Roys and Neil Shenvi said no receipts were ever made public. Then came the plagiarism accusations. Quotes from Richard Delgado allegedly fabricated. Sections lifted from James Lindsay without full attribution. Voddie defended himself in a podcast calling them stylistic choices. His publisher backed him. His fans doubled down, but the damage was done. What began as admiration was turning into audit. The man who built an empire on truth was now being asked to prove it line by line, dollar by dollar. Supporters called the attack slander. Detractors called it karma. But one thing was clear, Baucham wasn't just shaping Christian culture anymore. He was the controversy. Voddie Baucham didn't die with a yacht, a mansion, or a Rolex collection. But make no mistake, he died wealthy. Wealthy in influence, wealthy in followers, wealthy in intellectual capital that became cold. Hard revenue. Unlike prosperity preachers who begged for jets, Voddie sold ideas books, sermons, systems, and millions bought in. He preached against the system, while quietly mastering it. To some, he was the last honest voice in a corrupted church. To others, he was a theological salesman with better branding. When he passed away in 2025 at age 56, tributes flooded in, but so did questions. The GoFundMe money, the plagiarism scandal, the spiritual trauma reported by former followers. His death didn't answer them, it amplified them in the end. Voddie Baucham left behind a blueprint. You don't need prosperity gospel to profit from the pulpit. You just need conviction and a camera. But now the question is yours. Should a pastor, even a brilliant, disciplined, faithful one, ever become a millionaire? Let us know in the comments.